The elevator smelled like someone else's cologne, and Nora Calloway smelled like 14 hours of other people's worst nights. She knew it the way you know your own pulse. Antiseptic, the metallic ghost of a code that had not gone the way anyone wanted, the cheap floral of the hand soap by Bay 6. Her teal scrubs were creased into the shape of a chair she had not sat in. Her sneakers, white once, squeaked against the brushed steel floor with every shift of her weight, and the sound was so ordinary, so deeply not this place, that she almost laughed. She had not had time to change. That was the whole story of the night, really. A pile-up on the parkway at 4 a.m, then a man who came in clutching his chest and turned out to be terrified rather than dying, which was its own kind of work, the talking down kind. The kind that did not show on a chart. By the time the sun came up, the world had handed her one more thing, and then one more, the way it always did. And she had stood at her locker at 6:40 in the evening, with a garment bag she had not opened, and a text from her sister that said, "You cannot cancel again. Nor, you have cancelled on every human being for 2 years." And she had looked at the dress, and looked at the badge still clipped to her chest, and made the lazy, exhausted, half-defiant decision that would change the shape of her life. She would go as she was. 20 minutes. Long enough to be able to say she had gone. Long enough that Danny could not call her a coward over Sunday eggs. She would walk into whatever overpriced restaurant a blind date with a name like Julian Hale had chosen. She would be the disaster in scrubs among the linen and the candlelight. She would order something. She would be human at a stranger for 1/3 of 1 hour. And then she would go home and sleep until her body forgave her. The elevator was glass on one side. The city fell away beneath her as it climbed, gold and humming, the long blue summer dusk pooling between the towers, and she pressed 2 fingers absently to the inside of her own wrist, the way she did 100 times a night to 100 other wrists, counting without meaning to. Her own heartbeat, fast. She told herself it was the 14 hours. The doors opened on the 51st floor, and she stepped out already composing her apology, already reaching for the easy joke about being underdressed, and the joke died in her mouth. The rooftop was empty. Not quiet. Empty. A whole restaurant, the kind that took your name in a hush and made you feel grateful to give it, and there was no one in it. The tables stood dressed and waiting in long, even rows, candles lit, glasses catching the last of the light, and not a single person sat at any of them. The summer evening lay open over the parapet, the city going copper and then violet at the edges, a warm wind moving the white linen so that the whole roof seemed to breathe. At the far end, near the glass rail where the skyline did its best work, one table was set for 2, and one man stood beside it with his hands at his sides, watching the elevator the way a person watches a door they are not sure they want opened. He was tall and very still. Dark suit, no tie, the collar open at the throat as though he had loosened it without noticing. He did not move toward her. He did not do the thing men did, the big warm advance with the hand already out. He simply stood and looked at her, and she watched something cross his face that she could not read, and that she would spend a long time afterward trying to name. Not surprise at the scrubs, which she had braced for, but something older and more careful. Something like a man bracing for a flash that did not come. "You're here," he said. His voice was low and even. "I had a number in my head, the odds you'd actually come. It was not a generous number." Nora looked at the empty rows of tables. She looked back at him. The squeak of her sneaker was the loudest thing on the roof. "Okay," she said. "I have questions." A muscle moved at the corner of his mouth that was not quite a smile. "I imagined you might." "You rented the whole place." She gestured, badge swinging, at the sea of empty linen. "It's a Tuesday. In summer. This place has a 6-week list. I looked it up in the locker room. I was going to be intimidated. I had a whole plan. And it's empty. There's no one here." Did everyone leave, or—" She stopped, because the obvious reading was arriving, and she did not love it. "Did you buy out a restaurant to impress a woman you've never met?" "No." He said it fast, the first ungoverned thing he had done. Then, more carefully, as if reeling the word back in. "Not for that." "Then what's the $20,000 of nobody for?" He turned his wrist a quarter turn, the watch sliding around the bone, a small mechanical fidget she would learn to read like weather. "Would you sit?" he said, instead of answering. "You've been on your feet. I can see it. There's a chair and bread, and a person whose entire job tonight is to bring you whatever you want, and otherwise pretend the two of us don't exist. I went to some trouble to arrange the not being watched part. It would be a waste if you left before using it." She should have left. That had been the plan. 20 minutes, and 4 of them were already gone, and her bed was a real place that existed in the world, and this was a man who hid a non-answer behind good manners, which she had learned long ago was the most expensive kind of evasion there was. But her feet hurt in a way that had stopped being a sensation and become a fact about the universe. And there was bread, and the chair he had pulled out faced the city, and she was so tired that the wanting to sit down simply outvoted everything wiser. She crossed the empty roof, sneakers announcing each step, and sat. The chair was absurdly comfortable. She let herself feel it for exactly 1 second, and then sat up straight, because comfort was a thing she did not entirely trust to be free. "I have to tell you the truth about tonight," she said, "because I'm too tired to do anything else, and because you should get to leave too if you want to. I came straight from a shift. I've been awake since yesterday. I have, conservatively, a granola bar's worth of blood sugar in my body. I'm wearing literal scrubs. I almost cancelled. My sister set this up, and she's going to ask me on Sunday whether I tried, and I am physically here so that I can say yes. That's the whole of it. I'm not going to be charming. I don't have it in me tonight. I just don't." She waited for the recalibration. She'd watched men do it across tables before. The small subtraction in the eyes when the woman in front of them turned out to be a person with a body and a job and a limit, instead of an evening's entertainment. She braced for it, the way she braced for everything, with her spine. Julian Hale sat down across from her, slowly, and looked at her with an attention so total it was almost rude, and said, "That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in about 9 years. The waiter came then, silent as a held breath, set down water and warm bread and the small dish of good oil, and withdrew to some respectful distance where he became furniture. Nora tore the bread with both hands and ate it like a person, not like a date, and across the empty rooftop, the man who had bought all this solitude watched her eat as though she were doing something he had forgotten was allowed. "You didn't answer my question," she said around the bread. "The empty restaurant, the 20 grand of nobody. You said not for that. So what's it for?" "You have a granola bar's worth of blood sugar," he said. "Eat first. I'll still be here. I'm told I'm a fixture." He nudged the oil an inch toward her, a small, precise motion, and that was the first thing he gave her. Not an answer, but the food, and a place to put it, and the strange grace of a man stepping out of the way of his own table so she could simply be at it. She would not understand for weeks how rare that was, how few people in his life had ever been allowed to leave one of his questions unanswered and stay anyway. She only knew that the bread was good, and the wind was warm, and somewhere, 51 floors down, the city went on watching everyone, except, for once, the two of them. What she did not know, what would take the whole length of the summer to surface, was that the man across from her had not bought the roof to impress her, and had not bought it to trap her, and had not bought it for any reason a tabloid would have printed. He had bought it because 9 years ago, a photograph of him at the worst hour of his life had been sold for money, and he had been performing composure for a camera ever since, and the only thing his fortune had ever managed to buy him that he actually wanted was a room where no one was looking. He had brought her to the one place on earth he felt unseen. He had not yet decided whether that was a gift or a mistake. Priya Nair had arranged the date over his explicit objection, which was the only way anything good ever happened to Julian Hale, and she said as much to the empty office at 7 the next morning when he came in looking, for the first time in living memory, like a man who had not slept and did not mind. "You're glowing," Priya said, not looking up from her tablet. "It's unsettling. Stop it. What happened?" Nothing happened. He set down 2 paper cups of coffee on her desk, which was itself an event. Julian Hale carrying coffee like a person who had walked past a cart and thought of someone. "We talked. She left after—" He checked the watch out of habit and caught himself. "Considerably more than 20 minutes. She fell asleep for 4 of them, mid-sentence, sitting up. I let her. The staff thought I'd poisoned her." Priya set the tablet down. "She fell asleep? On the date? That you bought an entire rooftop for?" "She'd been awake for 31 hours saving people's lives," he said. "I found it restful. I have spent every dinner of the last decade being looked at across a table by someone deciding what I was worth to them. She closed her eyes in front of me. Do you understand how—" He stopped. He turned the watch. "It's nothing. Don't make it a thing." "It's already a thing," Priya said, with the gentleness of a woman who had run his life for 6 years and loved him in the exasperated way you love a brilliant person who keeps walking into walls he built himself. "You bought coffee. 2 coffees. With your hands. One of them is for you. That's what makes it a thing." He had built Hale Hotels out of the wreckage of his father's small, good hotel and the public ruin that followed it. 11 properties now. The new flagship opening on the harbor in 6 weeks. His face on the kind of magazine covers that called him reclusive, as though it were a flavor of luxury rather than a wound. He gave nothing away. He had made not giving anything away into a brand worth 9 figures, and he had spent one evening across a table from a woman who could not be bothered to want anything from him, who had eaten his bread and fallen asleep mid-sentence, and woken and apologized and asked, gracelessly, with her badge on, whether he was lonely up there in his sky full of nobody. And he had not answered that one either. But he had not been able to stop thinking about it, the way she had asked it like a nurse, like a person whose job was to notice the symptom everyone else was too polite to name. "She works nights," he said. "She's free at 6 in the morning. She is not free at any of the hours when a man takes a woman to dinner." "Then take her to breakfast," Priya said, and went back to her tablet, and let him discover on his own, slowly, over the following days, that he was already planning to. He came to the hospital at the end of her next shift, because she had told him, half asleep, that the cafeteria coffee was the worst in the city, and that she loved it anyway, that there was a particular booth by the window that got the early light, that the night staff defended it like a country. He had filed this away the way he filed everything. He arrived at 6 in the morning in a charcoal suit that cost more than the booth's annual revenue, and stood in the doorway of a hospital cafeteria looking so profoundly out of context that a passing resident offered him directions to the executive offices. Nora found him there 20 minutes later, in the booth, with 2 of the terrible coffees in front of him in their thin paper cups, having clearly been told by someone that this was where she sat. She stopped in the doorway. Her braid had half come loose. There was a stain on her sleeve she had stopped noticing hours ago. She looked at the most controlled man she had ever met, sitting in a vinyl booth holding a cup of coffee he obviously found undrinkable, waiting. And something in her chest did a thing she did not have the energy to manage. "You can't be here," she said, sitting down across from him because her feet had already decided. "This coffee is genuinely terrible. I told you that. You came anyway. Why would you do that?" "You said you loved it." He pushed one cup toward her, the same small, precise motion as the oil dish, an inch across the table. "Here, this is yours." I wanted to see the thing you love when you're too tired to perform liking anything. You're easier to read when you're tired. You stop arranging your face." He took a sip of his own and managed barely not to react. "It's the worst coffee I have ever had. You were right. I find I don't mind." She laughed, a real one, surprised out of her, scraping and rough at the edges from the long night, and for a moment the cafeteria, with its hum and its bad fluorescent dawn and its smell of industrial eggs, was the warmest place in the city. "You drove across town at 5 in the morning to drink bad coffee in a vinyl booth," she said. "You, the man with the empty rooftop." "I'm beginning to suspect," he said, "that the empty rooftop was the loneliest possible solution to a problem I had described to myself wrong." He turned the cup a quarter turn on the table. "I would like to keep seeing you, at your hours, in your places. I have spent a great deal of money making sure no one ever sees me. It has not made me less visible. It has only made me more alone. You looked at me across that roof and asked if I was lonely as though it were a medical question. And I have not stopped thinking about the fact that you were the first person in 9 years to ask it to my face." Nora wrapped both hands around the bad coffee. She thought about her bed and her sister's tuition gap, and the long arithmetic of her life in which there was never quite enough of her to go around. And she thought about the way no one had ever once, in any of it, simply shown up to the place where she already was and met her there. 6 a.m., she said. "I'm not changing my schedule for you. I can't. People here need me at the hours they need me, and I'm not—" She pressed 2 fingers to the inside of her wrist without realizing, counting. "I'm not somebody you reschedule your life is built around. I'm not a project. If we do this, it bends to me, because my life doesn't bend. That's the deal. I won't pretend to have time I don't have." "Good," Julian said. "I have spent my whole life around people who bent. It turns out to be a very expensive way to be lied to." He lifted the terrible coffee. 6 a.m. Your places. I'll learn the booth." He learned the booth. He learned other things across the slow, warm weeks of that summer, in stolen mornings and the occasional impossible evenings she could carve loose. He learned that she took her coffee black until the 3rd sip, and then poured in cream like a person finally allowing herself one mercy. He learned that she checked her own pulse when she was overwhelmed, 2 fingers to the wrist, a tell so unconscious she did not know she did it. And he learned not to mention it. He learned that she had a sister named Danny in her 2nd year of nursing school whose tuition had a gap in it, the exact shape of Nora's overtime, and that Nora would sooner walk into traffic than let him close that gap. And so he did not offer, which cost him something, and which she noticed. She learned things too. She learned that he had a habit with the watch. She learned that he never, ever sat with his back to a window when other people were in the room. That he chose corners the way she chose them, in a code. That the empty rooftop had a logic she was only beginning to map. She learned that when she asked him a direct question about himself, he turned the watch and gave her an answer adjacent to the true one, and that the true one lived underneath, and that he was waiting, without seeming to wait, to find out whether she was safe. "You do a thing," she told him one morning, 6:15, the booth, the bad coffee, rain that had come in the night and washed the city so the light off the wet streets was clean and silver. "When you're about to say something true, you turn your watch. Quarter turn. I've been counting." She tapped her own wrist, the pulse check, and caught herself, and they both pretended she had not. "We're a couple of ticks in a vinyl booth. It's honestly pathetic." "Speak for yourself," he said. "I'm extremely composed." "You drink the worst coffee in the city 3 mornings a week to be near a tired woman in scrubs. You're not composed. You're just quiet about it." She said it lightly, but she watched him as she said it, the way she watched a monitor, and she saw the truth of it land in him, and saw him decide for the first time not to turn the watch and slide away from it.
My father had a hotel, Julian said. 40 rooms by the water. He knew every guest's name and the names of their dogs. He thought that was the business, the knowing. He was right, and the world was wrong, and the world won. And when it took the hotel, it took him with it. And a man with a long lens photographed me on the day of the funeral. And the photograph was... He stopped. He did not turn the watch. He held very still, the way he had held still on the rooftop, a man bracing for a flash. It paid for someone's vacation, that photograph. Me at 22, at the worst hour of my life, on a magazine in a grocery store. I rebuilt everything he lost and more. And I did it as someone who has never once forgotten that the camera is there. The empty rooftop, Nora. You asked what the $20,000 of nobody was for. It was for an hour of not being looked at. I didn't know I was buying it for you until you walked out of the elevator in your terrible shoes and looked at me like I was a person who might be lonely instead of a brand that might be useful. The rain came down the window in long, clean lines. Nora reached across the table and did not take his hand, because that was not the language yet. But she moved the terrible coffee an inch toward him. Here, this is yours. His own gesture handed back, and he looked at the cup and then at her, and something in him that had been braced for 9 years, let down by a single notch. That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in about 9 years, she said, giving him his own line, and he laughed, quietly, the first joke she had ever heard him make at his own expense, and said, I'm aware of the exchange rate. I'm in your debt by 1 rooftop. Rosa Delgado had been charge nurse on nights for 22 years and had personally watched the booth by the window survive 3 renovations, 4 administrators, and 1 small fire. And she had opinions about the man who kept appearing in it at dawn in suits that did not belong in a building where people came to be saved or to die. She delivered the opinions to Nora in the supply room at 4 in the morning, restocking gauze in the flat, effectless voice she used for both code blues and gossip. The suit's back, Rosa said. In your booth. He brought a thermos this time, an actual thermos. He's trying to upgrade the coffee. I told him the coffee is load-bearing. If the coffee improves, the entire night shift collapses. He wrote it down. She tore a strip of tape with her teeth. I've decided I like him. It's against my better judgment. Don't tell him. He wrote it down, Nora repeated, in a little notebook. A rich man with a leather notebook writing down what a charge nurse says about coffee at 4 a.m. Rosa snapped the supply cabinet shut. Mija, I have watched 100 men come to this hospital to fall in love with the idea of a nurse. The angel of mercy thing. They want the uniform, not the woman in it. They last about 3 weeks, until they figure out you smell like the job, and you cancel on them, and you fall asleep at dinner. She looked at Nora over her glasses. That one's been coming for 6. He drinks the bad coffee. He doesn't ask you to change your hours, and he writes down what the staff says like he's trying to learn the place instead of get you out of it. So I like him. Against my better judgment. Now go talk to him before the chest pain in 4 wakes up and ruins both your mornings. The chest pain in 4 did wake up as it happened, and it was nothing, which was the best kind of something, and by the time Nora made it to the booth, the early light had come fully up over the parking structure, and Julian was sitting with 2 of the terrible coffees and the rejected thermos pushed to the far end of the table like a confiscated weapon. Your charge nurse confiscated my thermos, he said. She said the coffee is load-bearing. She's right, it is. Nora slid into the booth and wrapped both hands around the cup he pushed an inch toward her. Here, this is yours. The gesture that had become a sentence between them. If you fix the coffee, what's left? The fluorescent lighting?
The smell? You'd be coming here from me, and then I'd have to take it seriously, and I don't have the time to take things seriously. She said it lightly, but she watched him over the cup, and he heard the real thing under the joke, the way he always did now.
I'm taking it seriously, he said. You should know that, so you can decide what you want to do about it. He turned the watch, then stopped himself, a small, visible correction, and left the true thing where it lay, instead of sliding off it. I'm aware I come with a great deal of inconvenient weather. The walls, the privacy, the fact that I can't take you anywhere a camera might be without it becoming a thing in a magazine. I've spent a long time being a difficult place to love. I just don't want you mistaking the difficulty for an absence. They're not the same. I'm here at 4 a.m. drinking the worst coffee in the city because the difficulty is real, and so is the rest of it. Nora pressed 2 fingers to the inside of her wrist, counting, and made herself stop, and put both hands back around the cup instead. My last one left, she said, because I was never present. His word. Present. He'd plan a dinner, and I'd get held for a trauma, and he'd sit at the restaurant alone and decide it was a referendum on how much I cared. 8 months of that. He told me, at the end, that I didn't need him. I needed a shift. That I'd married the hospital, and he was the affair. She turned her cup a quarter turn on the table, his towel, and caught herself doing it, and they both pretended she had not. So, when you tell me you're taking it seriously, the thing I hear, the thing I can't help hearing, is a countdown. You'll take it seriously right up until the night I cancel for a trauma, and you're standing in some beautiful empty place you bought for me, alone, deciding I don't care. And then you'll go. They always go. The going is the only part I'm ever sure of. I'm not going to plan a dinner you have to cancel, Julian said. That's the whole architecture of it. Nora, I'm not building anything. You'd have to leave. I'm coming to where you already are. There's no beautiful empty place for me to stand in feeling sorry for myself. Because the place is this booth, and you're in it. And if you get held for a trauma, I'll drink the coffee and read my email, and be here when you surface. I spent $20,000 on an empty rooftop to feel unwatched, and it made me lonelier than I've ever been. I'm not making that mistake twice. I don't want the grand version. I want the booth. Outside the window, a bus exhaled at the stop, and a man in scrubs from another unit walked to his car in the flat new light. And Nora looked at the man across the table, who had decided, apparently, to love her in the one shape that had never yet broken in her hands. And she did not have a defense ready, which had not happened to her in years. Okay, she said, not yes. She had a private rule, lately, against that particular word. It had been the word her mother wanted, the achievement word, the good girl word, and she found she could not spend it cheaply anymore. Okay, the booth. We'll see how long your inventory of jokes holds out. Her sister Danny met him by ambush, which was the only way Danny did anything, arriving at the booth one Saturday dawn, unannounced in her own nursing student scrubs, with a backpack full of pharmacology flashcards and an agenda she did not bother to hide. You're the rooftop, Danny said, sitting down next to her sister and across from the most private man in the city, as though she vetted billionaires every morning. She told me about the rooftop, the whole empty restaurant. I have follow-up questions and approximately 9 minutes before my study group. Danny, Nora said, it's a reasonable line of inquiry. Danny helped herself to her sister's coffee, grimaced and drank it anyway, a family trait. Here's my concern. My sister has been holding up our entire family since she was 19. Our mother is, we'll say, complicated. Nora paid for things. Nora always pays for things. Nora pays for things and then acts like she's the one who got the favor. She is currently, as we speak, working a 6th shift this week to cover a gap in my tuition that she will deny exists if you ask her. Danny leveled a flashcard at Julian like a scalpel. So my follow-up question is, are you another thing she's going to end up taking care of? Because she doesn't have room. There's no room. People keep handing her things to carry and calling it love. The booth went quiet. Nora opened her mouth to deflect, to make it light, to do the thing she did, and Julian put his hand flat on the table, not touching her, just there, a small, steadying object, and answered the girl directly. "That's the right question," he said. "It's the question I'd ask if she were mine to protect, which she's making clear she is not. She's her own. So I'll answer it honestly. I have more money than any person needs, and almost no one in my life who wants nothing from me. Your sister wants nothing from me. It's the most disorienting thing that's ever happened to me." He turned the cup a quarter turn on the table, the way a man does when the real sentence is still arriving. "My instinct, when I find a person like that, is to start handing them things, because handing people things is how I know how to love. It's safe. It keeps me in charge. It means I'm useful, and therefore can't be left. I have to fight that instinct every single morning in this booth. I am not going to close your tuition gap, even though I could do it before my coffee gets cold and never feel it because she's told me not to, and because the version of me that overrides her to feel useful is exactly the man she should leave. The thing I'm trying to learn how to do, and I'm bad at it, I'm new, is to want her without managing her. To be here without buying anything. To let her keep paying for your school on her 6th shift because it matters to her that she can. And to just sit in the booth and be glad she lets me watch." He picked up the terrible coffee. "Is that 9 minutes worth of answer?" Danny looked at him for a long moment, then at her sister, then back. "Huh," she said. She gathered her flashcards. "Okay, that was better than I expected. The bar was on the floor, but you cleared it with room." She stood, slung the backpack, and delivered the verdict over her shoulder on her way out. Pure Calloway family deadpan, the kind both sisters had been raised on. "Don't fix her, rich man. She's not broken. She's just tired. There's a difference, and most people can't tell." And she was gone into the morning, and Nora sat very still with both hands around her coffee. "I like your sister," Julian said. "Everyone likes my sister." Nora's voice was not quite steady. "She said the thing. The thing nobody ever... She's tired, not broken. I've been trying to tell people that my whole life, and nobody..." She pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, found the count gone wild, took them away. "You didn't try to fix me just now. You had a whole speech about not fixing me. Do you have any idea how many men would have used that exact moment to offer to pay for the school? It would have looked so generous. It would have been the worst thing you could possibly do." "I know," he said. "I almost did it. The sentence was loaded. I had to physically not say it." He turned the watch, caught it, stopped. "I'm learning, Nora. Slowly. In a vinyl booth. It's the only education I've ever paid for that I think might actually take." She carved loose one real evening in the middle of that summer, the first in years. A Tuesday she traded 2 future shifts to claim, and she expected him to produce something enormous. And instead, he took her to a public park at the Blue Hour with a paper bag of food from a cart, and they sat on an ordinary bench among ordinary people. And it was the most exposed she had ever seen him choose to be. "This is a test," she observed, watching him not relax beside her, his shoulders carrying the old vigilance, his eyes doing the corner-finding thing even with no corners to find. "You hate this. There are 40 people here. Any of them could have a phone." "All of them have a phone." He said it through his teeth, but he stayed on the bench. "I'm doing it on purpose. You stood in a marble lobby in scrubs and let a room decide about you and didn't flinch. I've watched you walk into rooms that hate you before you speak. I figured the least I could do was sit on a bench." He unwrapped a sandwich with the grim focus of a man diffusing ordnance.
If a photograph of me eating a $4 sandwich on a public bench ends up in a magazine, the magazine will be very confused, and I will have been seen doing something ordinary, and I'm trying to find out whether the world ends when that happens. So far, it has not ended. The sandwich is also genuinely good, which I did not expect, and which is annoying. Nora laughed, and the child ran past, chasing a dog, and the long summer light came down gold and forgiving through the trees, and she leaned her shoulder against his, the first time she had initiated the touch, and felt him go still, and then, slowly, lean back.
My mother,
She said, to the park, not to him, which was how she had learned from him to say the true things. Only ever showed up when I won something. A pin, a grade, a certificate. She'd be at the ceremony, front row, telling everyone she'd raised me. And then nothing, for months, until the next thing I achieved. I figured out around 12 that the love came out of a vending machine, and the coins were accomplishments. So I just kept feeding it coins. Straight A's, then nursing school on scholarship, then the overtime, the being the one who handles it, the carrying. I'm 27, and I have never once in my life let myself believe a person would stay in the room if I stopped producing. I check my own pulse, she said, touching her wrist, letting him see it, naming it for the first time when I get overwhelmed. Did you know that? I do it without knowing. I check my own pulse like I'm my own patient. Because some part of me is always making sure I'm still useful, still running, still worth keeping on the floor. She breathed. You wanted to know who I am when no one needs me. I genuinely don't know, Julian. I've never met her. I'm a little afraid there's no one there. That without the usefulness, it's just an empty rooftop. Lights on, nobody home. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over, and with 2 fingers, very gently, the way she did it to him now, he pressed them to the inside of her wrist, over her pulse, holding her hand still so she could not do it to herself. There's someone there, he said. I've met her. She fell asleep mid-sentence in front of a stranger because her body finally trusted a room enough to stop guarding it. She came up an elevator, 100% sure she was leaving, and stayed for the rest of the night because someone moved a dish an inch toward her. She told a man who buys empty rooftops that he was lonely, as a kindness, when she was the most tired person in the building. That's not an empty roof. That's the most occupied room I've ever stood in. You just can't see it from the inside. The same way I couldn't see the wall I'd built until you stood at the bottom of it and told me it was a wall. He kept his fingers on her pulse. We're going to learn the other one together. Who you are off the clock. I have a theory she's been there the whole time and just never got to come out, because there was always one more person to save. I'd like to save her a seat. The park went on around them, indifferent and warm, and somewhere a phone might have been pointed their way, and neither of them checked. And that, the not checking, on a public bench, at the blue hour, 2 people who had each spent a lifetime guarding the exits, was the most reckless thing either of them had done in years. The flagship opened on the harbour at the height of summer, and Camille Ashford had spent 11 months building the night the way a general builds a war. Every guest vetted, every angle planned, every photograph that would leave that rooftop already imagined and approved. Hale Hotels did not throw parties. Hale Hotels staged the controlled appearance of a reclusive king, and Camille was the one who stage managed the king's every glimpse, and she had done it for 6 years with a precision that bordered on devotion, because she had learned, the hard way, in a previous life she never discussed, that one wrong image could end you, that the unpolished got walked out the door while the lens kept rolling, that warmth was a luxury people who clawed their way up could not afford. She found out about the nurse the way she found out about every threat to the brand, from a photograph. A long lens shot, not yet sold, offered to her by a man who knew she paid to make such things disappear. Julian, in a hospital cafeteria, at dawn, in a vinyl booth, his composure entirely gone from his face, looking at a woman in scrubs the way the brand had spent 9 years and 9 figures, ensuring he would never be photographed looking at anyone. Camille had killed the photo. Then she had sat with it open on her screen for a long time, straightening the already straight objects on her desk, and what she had felt was not jealousy. It was fear. The whole edifice of the man's untouchability, the thing she had built her life on guarding, was apparently being undone in a hospital cafeteria by a girl with a stain on her sleeve. And Camille Ashford did not know how to manage a man who had stopped wanting to be managed. So when Nora came to the flagship launch, late after a shift because it was the only way she came to anything, in scrubs again because there had been no time again, walking into 11 months of curated marble in her squeaking white shoes, Camille was ready, and the social circle of Hale Hotels was ready, and the night turned its beautiful polished face toward the tired woman in teal and found her wanting. It was done the way that world did everything, without a single rude word. A raised brow passed between 2 women in champagne silk. A man asked Nora, smiling, which agency had sent her, and whether the medical staff usually mingled. A photographer's assistant gently, apologetically, asked her to step out of frame. Camille herself was perfectly, immaculately kind, which was the cruelest register of all, taking Nora lightly by the elbow and steering her toward the edge of the roof, toward the service stair, away from the lit center, where Julian stood being a brand, and saying, low and warm and final, "You understand what a night like this costs to build. I'm sure you of all people understand pressure. Let's find you somewhere more comfortable than all this noise." And Julian, 50 feet away, ringed by the people he paid to look at him in the approved way, saw it happen. Saw Nora's spine go straight. Saw the elbow, the steering, the gentle erasure, and the old wound spoke before the new love could, and he hesitated. 1 second. 2. The lifetime of training that said, do not make a scene, do not give them an image, do not be seen wanting something, holding him in place for exactly as long as it took for Nora to look across the marble and see him not move. She did not make a scene either. That was the thing that gutted him later. She simply let Camille steer her, and she went quietly toward the service stair, with her chin up and her badge catching the light, the most dignified retreat he had ever watched. And at the door she looked back at him once, and there was no anger in it, which was worse. There was only a kind of recognition, as though the world had finally said the thing she had always known it would say, and she had heard it, and she was not even surprised. She was 4 steps from the service door, Camille's hand still light at her elbow, when the sound reached her. A chair going over, a woman's short cry, the particular wrong shape of a body losing the negotiation with its own weight. And Nora Calloway stopped being a guest in a marble lobby and became the only useful person in the room before her conscious mind had finished turning around. An older man, silver-haired, important by the cut of him, had gone down near the bar. Heat, champagne, a long evening on a rooftop where the summer air still held the day's warmth like a held breath. He was grey and sheened, and his hand was at his collar. And the beautiful, curated crowd had done the thing beautiful, curated crowds do, which was to form a useless ring and make a sound and wait for permission. Nora shed Camille's hand without seeming to. She was across the marble in her squeaking white shoes before anyone had decided whether it was appropriate, and she went down on her knees beside the man on the floor of the $11 million launch in her teal scrubs. And the room that had been deciding she did not belong watched the scrubs arrive like the cavalry. "Sir, I'm a nurse. I've got you. Look at me." 2 fingers to his wrist, her own gesture, the one she did to herself in the dark, now where it was meant to go. Thready, fast, there. "I need everyone back. Not out, back. Give him air. You,
She pointed at a man in a tuxedo without looking up. "Phone. Call it in now. Tell them syncopal collapse. Conscious. Query cardiac. This address, the 51st floor. They'll need the freight elevator, not the guest one. Say hail. They'll come fast. Go." He went. "You!" Camille, frozen at the edge. "Is there an AED in this building? You built this building. Where is it?" Camille's immaculate machine stalled. "I don't." "Lobby. Every commercial property has one by the lobby fire panel. Send someone running, now. Even if we don't use it, I want it on the floor in 90 seconds. And Camille Ashford, who had stage managed every glimpse of this night for 11 months, found herself running across her own perfect launch in her ivory heels to fetch a defibrillator on the word of a nurse in scrubs, and did it without a flicker of protest, because there is a register of authority that the luxury world has no answer for, and Nora was speaking in it. She got him onto his back, loosened the collar her own kind always loosened, elevated his legs onto a chair some instinct in the crowd finally thought to provide, talked to him the whole way down and the whole way back. "Stay with me. You're all right. You got too hot and your blood pressure took a holiday. It happens to the best of us. No, don't sit up. Humor me. I do this for a living and you do not." And the color came back into him by degrees, the grey going pink, the wild, thready pulse under her 2 fingers, settling towards something that wanted to live. And the whole rooftop stood in a hush, watching the woman they had asked to step out of frame run the most important 90 seconds of the entire launch. Julian had moved this time. He was there, at the edge of it, and she registered him without looking, the way you register weather, and she did not need him, which he understood, finally, fully, was the entire point of her. She was the most necessary person in any room she entered, and she had never once needed to be needed back. And he had spent a summer terrified of wanting a woman who could not be managed, when the thing he should have been doing was learning to deserve her. The paramedics came up the freight elevator in 6 minutes, which was fast, because someone had said hail. Nora handed the man off in 3 clean sentences. Onset, vitals, what she'd done. The way you hand a life from one pair of trained hands to another. And she stood up off the marble floor in her creased scrubs with the man's collar back and his frightened wife clutching her sleeve and saying, "Thank you, thank you." And she was, for one suspended moment, the most looked-at person on the entire rooftop. The woman the room had erased, now standing at its exact lit center, with a life in her hands, and not one phone came up. That was the thing she would remember. Not one phone came up. The crowd that lived by the image, that had asked her to step out of frame, stood in the presence of an actual emergency and discovered they did not, after all, want a photograph of it. They wanted her to fix it. And she had. And the scrubs they had sneered at on her way in were, it turned out, the only thing on the roof that had been worth a damn when the night went sideways. Camille stood holding the AED they had not needed and looked at the nurse in the center of the light, and something moved behind the polish that would take her weeks to name. And Julian, who had moved this time, but only after, only once the danger gave him permission, only when there was a crisis to be useful in, instead of a quiet cruelty to simply stand against. Julian understood, watching her, that moving for her in an emergency was easy, was nothing, was the cheap version. The night she actually needed him to move, he had needed it to cost him nothing, and it had cost her everything. And no amount of competence on a marble floor was going to fix the 4 steps he had failed to take, while a woman he loved was walked toward a service door in front of him. The service stair was concrete and cool after the lacquered heat of the party, and Nora stood on it for a moment with her hand on the cold rail, breathing, doing the arithmetic she had done her whole life. How much of this was hers to carry? How much to set down? When she heard a sound below her and went still. Camille Ashford was on the landing 1 flight down, and she did not know she was being watched. She had stepped out of the party the way you step out of a held breath, and she had taken off one ivory heel and was pressing her stockinged foot against the cool concrete, her face for once not arranged into anything. And Nora watched her reach down and straighten the strap of the abandoned shoe so that it lay perfectly parallel to its mate on the step. An utterly pointless precision. The act of a woman ordering the 1 square foot of the world she could still control.
Then Camille pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth, and her shoulders moved once, and she looked at her own reflection in the dark window of the stairwell with an expression of such exhaustion and such fear that Nora, who read faces for a living, who knew the difference between a person performing distress and a person ambushed by it, recognized it instantly, because she had worn it herself, at her own locker, more nights than she could count. Nora did not go down. She did not say anything. Whatever was happening on that landing belonged to Camille and not to her, and she had spent her life respecting the privacy of people in pain. She stepped back from the rail, quietly, and let the heavy door close between them, and she carried the image of it down the rest of the stairs and out into the warm night without yet knowing what to do with it. The polished woman who had erased her, alone in a stairwell, ordering a pair of shoes, because it was the only thing left she could keep straight. He found her at the hospital the next morning, not the booth. She was at the ambulance bay when his car pulled up, just coming off shift into the white summer light, and she did not pretend to be glad to see him. "You didn't move," she said. No preamble. She was too tired for it and too honest, which were the same thing in her. 50 feet. She walked me off the roof in front of everyone, and you watched, and you didn't move. I know. He had not slept. It showed, on him, the way it's never showed. His composure cracked clean down the middle. I know what I didn't do. I've been standing in it all night. There's a thing that happens in me when there's a room full of people watching. I learned it at 22 in front of a camera, and it's older and faster than anything I feel for you. And it took me over for exactly long enough to fail you, and I will spend a long time being sorry for that. But I'm not going to insult you by pretending the failure was small. It wasn't about the party. She wrapped her arms around herself in the white morning. I don't care about the party, Julian. I came in scrubs. I knew what I was walking into. I've been walking into rooms that decided about me before I opened my mouth my whole life. I can take a room. What I can't take? She pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, counting, and this time she did not hide it from him. What I can't take is being something a person wants until I cost them something. That's the only thing I've ever been afraid of. My whole life, I've been the one who shows up, who's useful, who handles it. And the second I'm a liability instead of a help, people find the service there for me. And I told you in the booth the first morning. I won't pretend to have time I don't have, and I won't be a project, and I won't be wanted only as long as I'm convenient. And the first time it cost you something to want me out loud, you didn't move. He stood in the ambulance bay in his expensive suit and let her see his face, which was the bravest thing she had ever watched him do. And he did not turn the watch. You're right, he said. About all of it. I'm not going to argue with the diagnosis. I'm going to fix the thing it found. Camille Ashford summoned her to the Brand Suite on a Friday, which was Camille's ground, the 44th floor of the Hale Tower, all glass and pale stone, and the kind of silence money buys. And Nora came on her own time, between a day of errands and a night shift, because she had decided some time ago that she did not run from rooms, and was not about to start with this one. The suite was arranged the way a held breath is arranged. Camille sat behind a desk with nothing on it, but a single folder squared precisely to the edge, and she did not offer coffee, and she came at it directly, which Nora respected even as the words landed. You were magnificent the other night, Camille said. I want to say that first, because it's true, and because I'm about to say things that will make you think I didn't notice. You saved a man's life on our floor, in front of 300 people. It was the realest thing that has happened at a Hale event in 6 years. I have built my entire career on making sure nothing real ever happens at a Hale event. And you walked in off a double shift and made the realest possible thing happen. And I have not stopped thinking about it. She aligned the folder a half inch, a pointless correction. Which is exactly the problem. You're a story now. Before, you were a photograph I could kill. Now you're a nurse who saved a guest at the reclusive Julian Hale's flagship. And that is a story with legs. And stories with legs do not stay the size you want them. They grow. They find your sister's school. They find your shifts. They find the worst day you ever had on that hospital floor, and they print it next to his face. "Is this the part where you offer me money?" Nora said. Not unkind, just tired and direct, the way she was direct with frightened patients. "Because I've had a long day and a longer night coming, and if there's a number on a check in that folder, I'd rather you just slit it across so we can both skip the speech." Camille's hand did not move toward the folder, which told Nora there was no check, which surprised her. "No," Camille said. "There's no check. I thought about it. A check would have been cleaner. The folder is something else." She did not open it. The afternoon light came flat and gold off the harbor through the glass, and somewhere below them, the city made its enormous, quiet sound, and the suite smelled of nothing at all, which was its own kind of expense. "I came up from nothing. I want you to know that, because you've decided I'm the marble, the people who look down their noses, and I'm not. I'm the girl who clawed in and learned the rules so well she became the one who enforces them. Somebody made me disappear once, cleanly, professionally, walked me out of a building I'd given 5 years to, with a camera running, over a photograph that wasn't even my fault. And I stood on the curb and decided I would spend the rest of my life being the one who held the camera, instead of the one in front of it. That's the whole story of me. That's the suite. That's the squared folder." Her composure was perfect, and Nora, who read faces for a living, watched it cost her everything to keep it perfect. "So here is what I'm actually telling you, and it isn't a threat, even though it's going to sound like one. He cannot protect you. He thinks he can. He's a man who's certain that walls work because they've worked for him. And the first time the world really comes for you, and it will, you're a story now. He is going to reach for the only tool he's got, which is the wall. And he is going to put you on the wrong side of it to keep you safe. And it is going to feel exactly like being discarded. And you are going to believe it's the truth about how much he loves you. And it won't be. It'll just be the wall. I've watched him do it to everyone. I've helped him do it. I'm telling you so that when it happens, you'll know what you're looking at." Nora stood very still in the glass suite. "Why?" she said. "Would you tell me that? You just spent 11 months trying to make me not exist. Why warn me?" For the first time, Camille's hand moved to her own wrist, an echo Nora caught and filed, and squared the cuff of her sleeve instead. "Because you saw me on the stair," she said flatly. "And you didn't use it. I've been in this world 11 years, and that has never once happened. People see me at the seams, and they file it for later. You stepped back and let the door close. I don't know what to do with that. It's been sitting in me like a stone." She stood, ending the meeting on her own terms, the polish closing back over her like water. "Go to your shift. I've said what I came to say. When the wall comes, remember a woman in a glass office told you in advance that it was a wall and not a verdict. That's the only kindness I have in stock. I'm aware it's a strange one." And Nora walked out of the Brand Suite into the summer afternoon with the strangest gift she had ever been handed. A warning from her enemy that the man she loved was going to break her heart in a specific way for a specific reason, and that it would not mean what it was going to feel like it meant. She did not, at the time, believe it. She filed it the way Camille said the world filed her, for later. Later came faster than she wanted. He learned to be funny by the middle of that summer,
which Nora marked privately as the moment she was in real trouble. It happened in the booth, the worst coffee in the city between them, when she was complaining about a doctor who took credit for a save that had been 90% her, and Julian listened the whole way through and then said, with the gravest possible face, "You should buy out a rooftop. I'm told it solves loneliness completely and creates absolutely no new problems." And she laughed so hard the coffee came close to a tragedy, and he watched her laugh, with the quiet astonishment of a man discovering a capability he had not known he owned. And she said, "Was that a joke? Did you make a joke?" And he said, "I've been saving it. I have a very small inventory. Be gentle." And that exact morning, was the one she would come back to in the dark weeks. The one she would have to decide whether to believe. Because there was a morning, near the end of the summer, but was so quiet and so good, it frightened her in the way only the about-to-be-lost can frighten you. It was the rooftop, his rooftop, the private one on the building where he lived, not the empty restaurant, but the small, real terrace where he had never once brought anyone, because bringing someone meant being seen, even by them, and he had not been able to bear it. He brought her up at 6 in the morning after a brutal shift, the city going gold at the edges in the summer dawn, and he had made the coffee himself, badly, on purpose, a paper cup of deliberately terrible coffee waiting for her on the rail, and she had laughed and called it sentimental and drunk all of it. They stood at the rail and watched the city wake, and he stood with his back to the open sky and the whole exposed view, and did not move to a corner, did not brace, let himself be a man on a roof in the light, where anyone with a long lens could have found him, and she understood what it cost him, and she did not make it a thing, which was its own gift. "When you finally take a real day off," he said, looking at the city and not at her, which was how he said the truest things, "I want to take you somewhere you can't be paged. Just one day. The sister can have the eggs. The hospital can survive 8 hours. I want to find out who you are when no one needs you. I think she's been waiting a long time for someone to want her." Nora pressed 2 fingers to her wrist out of old habit, and then deliberately took them away, and wrapped both hands around the warm cup instead, and let herself for 1 whole minute be a woman who was wanted, instead of a woman who was needed. And the terror of how good it felt was the last clean thing she remembered before everything came apart. The photograph surfaced on a Thursday. It was not the hospital one. Camille had killed that. This was worse and older. Someone had gone digging into the reclusive Julian Hale's new entanglement, had found the booth, had found the nurse, and had paired it, in the cruelest possible layout, with the original. Julian at 22 on the day of the funeral, raw and undone, the photograph that had paid for someone's vacation. And beside it, Julian now, in a vinyl booth at dawn, undone in exactly the same way, looking at a woman in scrubs. "The price of privacy," the headline said. What is the reclusive hotelier hiding in a hospital cafeteria? And under it, her face, her badge, the name of her hospital, her sister's school somehow dug up and printed. Nora's whole quiet, useful life pried open and laid on a grocery store shelf next to the worst hour of his. He did the thing he had built himself never to do, and it was the wrong thing, and he knew it was the wrong thing even as the old machine took him over and did it. He went silent. He went to ground. He had spent 9 years learning that when the camera found you, the only safety was to give it nothing, to disappear, to wait it out behind walls, and the machine that had run him since he was 22 ran him now. And it told him that the way to protect her was to make the story untrue by making them untrue, to put distance between them so loud and so visible that the lens would lose interest. And he did it without asking her, because the wound did not believe in asking. The wound believed only in the wall. Camille drafted the statement. Hale Hotels regrets any implication of impropriety. The individual photographed is unaffiliated with the brand.
There is no relationship. It went out under his name, with his silence for a signature. And it landed on Nora's phone in the break room at 3 in the morning, between a chest pain and a child with a fever. Unaffiliated, no relationship. The official confirmation in the brand's own cool voice that she had been, after all, exactly what she had always feared she was. A thing a powerful person had wanted, right up until the moment it cost him something. And then, a thing to be walked, quietly, immaculately, down the service stair. She read it twice. She pressed 2 fingers to her wrist and could not find the count, her own pulse gone wild and far away, and the LIE she had carried her whole life sat up in her, and spoke in her mother's voice and in her ex's voice, and now in Julian Hale's brand-approved voice. All of them saying the same thing, the thing she had always known, and let herself, for one summer, one terrible, hopeful summer, almost forget. That she was loved for her usefulness and discarded for her cost. That the wanting had never been for her. That the moment she became a liability, the people who had pulled out her chair would find the door. And that she had been a fool. A tired, lonely, 31 hours awake fool, to climb out of that elevator and believe the rooftop had been empty for any reason, but to make sure no one ever had to be seen choosing her. She did not rage. She did not call him. Raging would have meant there was something still to fight for, and the official statement had been very clear that there was not. She put her phone in her locker, and she went back to the chest pain, and she did her job. Because her job was the one thing in her life that had never once decided she was too expensive to keep. And she let the wall he had built come down on top of both of them. And she did not let herself cry until the drive home. Alone, in the white, indifferent morning, where no one was looking, where no one ever was. Maybe he really had only wanted the novelty of her. Maybe the man in the booth had been buying an hour of feeling unlooked at, the same as the rooftop, the same as everything. And she had been the cup of bad coffee, the slumming charm of the worst in the city, restful precisely because she could be set down. Maybe the whole summer had been a wealthy man's experiment in being briefly real. And she had been the lab. She made herself say it, the worst version, all the way through, the way she made frightened patients say the worst version out loud, so it would stop owning them from the dark. It did not stop owning her. She drove home in the morning light, and the city watched her the way it watched everyone, which was not at all. And she understood that she had let herself be seen, exactly once, by exactly the wrong person, and that the cost of it was going to be very high, and that she would pay it the way she paid everything, on her feet, alone, on time. Rosa found her 3 nights later in the supply room at 4 in the morning, not restocking, just standing, holding a roll of gauze she had no use for. And Rosa did the thing she had done for 22 years, which was to keep her own voice flat, and let the flatness be the mercy. "The suit hasn't been in the booth," Rosa said, putting the gauze back on the shelf where it lived, taking the roll out of Nora's hand without comment. 6 weeks of dawns and then nothing. And you've been working like the floor owes you money. 6th shift again? You only do the 6th shift when you're trying to outrun something. So. She squared a box of saline on the shelf, an ordinary nurse's tidiness, and did not look at Nora while she said the next part, because some things are easier said to a shelf. "What did he do?" "A statement. There's a magazine. It put me next to a picture of him from 9 years ago. The worst day of his life. And then his people put out a statement that I'm unaffiliated. No relationship." Nora's voice was steady, because she had decided it would be. "It's fine. It's the thing I always knew would happen. You told me. The Angel of Mercy thing. 3 weeks, until they figure out you smell like the job." He lasted longer than most. I should be flattered. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I did say that. I say it to all of you. It's true about 90% of them." She turned around.
But I also said I liked him, against my better judgment. You want to know why, since you're standing in my supply room at 4 a.m. holding gauze for no reason? It's because of the notebook. The leather notebook he wrote the coffee thing in. A man who's slumming. A man who wants the uniform and not the woman. That man doesn't take notes. He doesn't try to learn the place. He performs being charmed for 3 weeks and leaves. Your suit was studying. 6 weeks of studying how to be near you without moving anything around. That's not a man who thinks you're a phase. That's a man who's terrified. And terrified is a different animal than bored. And you, of all people, Micha, you should know the difference. Because reading the difference between scared and gone is literally your entire job. Nora pressed 2 fingers to her wrist and found her own pulse going. And she remembered. Then, standing in the cold supply room, the glass office and the squared folder and the strangest gift she had ever been handed. He cannot protect you. The first time the world really comes for you, he is going to reach for the only tool he's got, which is the wall, and he is going to put you on the wrong side of it to keep you safe. And it is going to feel exactly like being discarded. And you are going to believe it's the truth about how much he loves you. And it won't be. It'll just be the wall. A woman in a glass office, her enemy, had told her in advance, to the letter, exactly what was going to happen and exactly how it would feel. And Nora had filed it for later. And later was now, 4 a.m, gauze in her hand, her own pulse wild under her own fingers. His director of brand warned me, she said slowly, to Rosa, to the shelf, to herself. Weeks ago. She said when the world came for me, he'd put me behind the wall to keep me safe. And it would feel like being thrown away, and I'd believe it was a verdict. And it would just be the wall. The thing he built at 22. She said, remember a woman told you in advance that it's a wall and not a verdict. She set the gauze down. I thought she was manipulating me. Why would my enemy warn me? But she wasn't selling anything. She was just telling me the truth about a man she'd watched do this to everyone for 6 years. And I forgot it the second it actually happened. Because the wall doesn't feel like a wall from the wrong side of it. It feels like the thing my mother taught me. It feels like the vending machine running out of coins. So which is it? Rosa said. The wall or the verdict? Because those are different floors, Micha. And you're standing in my supply room instead of going up to find out. Which tells me you already suspect it's the wall and you're scared. Because if it's the wall, then it can come down. And if it can come down, then this isn't over. And you've built a whole life on things being over, so you can stop holding your breath. She picked up her clipboard, the conversation ending on her schedule, the way everything on the floor ended on her schedule. Chest pain in 4's going to wake up in about 10 minutes. You've got that long to decide whether you're a nurse who reads scared versus gone for a living, or a scared girl who can't read it on herself. I know which one I trained. And she went, and left Nora in the supply room, with her own pulse under her own 2 fingers, and the awful dawning possibility, more frightening than the verdict had ever been, that she had been loved the whole time, and had walked away from it, because being loved was the one emergency she had never been trained to survive. She did not go up to the glass tower. Not yet. She was not ready, and she would not perform a readiness she did not have. That much, at least, the summer had not taken from her. But she stopped working the 6th shift. She let the gauze stay on the shelf. And she carried Camille's warning back out of the file marked later, and held it where she could see it, and waited, on her feet, but no longer entirely sure she was alone. He sat in his glass office above the harbor, with the killed and unkilled photographs spread across his desk, and understood, slowly, in the particular silence of a man who has gotten everything technically right and lost everything that mattered, what he had done. Priya did not soften it. You issued a statement saying she doesn't exist, she said. To protect her from the experience of existing.
Do you hear it, Julian? Do you hear what you did? I made the story too boring to chase. His voice was flat, the brand voice, the wall. Give it a week and they'll move on. She'll be safe. Her sister's school will stop getting calls. It's the only thing that's ever worked. It's the only thing that's ever worked at making you disappear, Priya said. You're not 22. There's no funeral. There's a woman who came out of an elevator and asked if you were lonely. And you just told a grocery store shelf that she's unaffiliated. You took the one person who looked at you and saw a person, and you used the brand to inform her, in writing, that she'd imagined it. She set a paper cup of coffee on his desk. Bad coffee. Gas station coffee. She had gone out of her way for it, and the cruelty of the kindness was exact. Drink that. Then decide whether you're a man or a wall. Because she already knows. She's known since the service stare. She's just waiting to find out if she was wrong. He looked at the terrible coffee. He turned his wrist a quarter turn, the watch sliding around the bone. And then he stopped, mid-motion, and looked at the tell he had carried since he was 22. The small mechanical fidget of a man about to slide away from a true thing into an adjacent, safer one. And he understood that the watch and the wall and the empty rooftop and the brand-approved statement were all the same object, the same 9-year-old reflex, the same hour of his life replaying. Give them nothing, disappear, do not be seen wanting, and that it had cost him his father's whole philosophy, the knowing of names, the warmth that the world had won against, and that he had become, in the rebuilding, exactly the thing that had destroyed the thing he loved. He did not turn the watch. He picked up the phone, and he did not call Nora, because he had not earned the right to call her, and the call would have been one more thing done to her without her say. He called the photographer, the man with the long lens, the original one, the one whose 9-year-old image had paid for a vacation. He still had the number. He had kept it the way you keep the number of the disease that nearly killed you. And he said, into the silence after the man answered, the most expensive sentence of his life. I want to give you a photograph, Julian Hale said. On the record, my face, undisguised, saying a true thing. I'll tell you when and where. You can sell it to whoever you like. I'm done buying the dark. Camille came to the hospital before he did, which neither of them expected, and which was its own kind of apology. She found Nora in the cafeteria, in the booth, at the end of a shift. The worst coffee in the city untouched in front of her because she had not been able to make herself drink it since Thursday. Camille stood at the end of the table in clothes that cost a year of Nora's salary, and looked, for once, like she had not slept either. And she did not sit down, because she had not been invited to. I drafted the statement, Camille said. No warmth now, no immaculate steering, just the flat fact, set down. He signed it with silence, but I wrote it. It's my voice you read. Unaffiliated, no relationship. I've written that sentence, or its cousin, about a dozen people over 6 years. It's the most effective thing I do. I make people disappear cleanly so the brand stays clean. And I'm very good at it. And I learned it the same place he did. Somebody made me disappear once. Cleanly. Professionally. Walked me out of a building with a lens running. And I decided I would rather be the one holding the lens for the rest of my life than ever be in front of it again. She put something on the table. A flash drive. And beside it a single printed photograph, face down. She squared them parallel to the edge of the table, the old, precise, pointless ordering, and then made herself stop. That's every copy of the hospital photo. The first one, the one I killed to protect him. I'm giving it to you instead of him, because it's yours. It's your face. And I have spent 6 years deciding what happens to other people's faces, and I'm tired. I'm so tired. And you saw me. Her voice did not break, but it came close, and she let it come close, which for Camille Ashford was the equivalent of weeping in the street. On the stair. I felt you see me. The shoe. I know you saw. You didn't say anything and you didn't use it, and I have been waiting my whole career for someone to use a thing like that against me. And you just let me have it. You let me keep it. She straightened, and the polish came back over her face, like water closing, but something underneath had moved and would not move back. I resigned this morning, from the part of the job that's making people disappear. He can find someone else to build his walls. I find I don't want to be a wall anymore. I wanted you to know that before he gets here. Because he's going to get here, and he's going to do something very stupid and very brave, and you should know it's real before you decide. She picked up her own coat from the back of the chair, an unhurried motion that brought her the last sentence. I told him the statement was the worst mistake of his life, and offered him my resignation in the same breath, and he took it without a fight. Not because he wanted me gone, but because he'd already decided to tear the wall down himself. And a wall builder is no use to a man done hiding. That's how I know it's real. She walked out the way she had walked in, immaculate, ordered, but she left the photograph face down on the table, and she did not square it to the edge. And Nora understood that the leaving it crooked was the apology, the whole of it, the most this woman had in her to give, and that it was enough. He did it at the harbour, at the flagship, in front of the lens. He did not stage it. That was the thing the brand could never have approved, the thing Camille would have killed in an instant in our old life. He gave no advance copy, scripted no angle, controlled nothing. He simply told the photographer a time, and he stood at the rail of the rooftop, where 11 months of curation had erased a tired woman in scrubs, and he waited for Nora to come off her shift. And when she came, because she came, in scrubs, because it was the only way she came to anything, walking into the marble in her squeaking white shoes one more time, not knowing what she was walking into. He turned to face the whole watching world with his back to nothing, and he let the camera find him undisguised, and he said it out loud where everyone could hear, where it could be sold, where it could not be taken back. 9 years ago, a man photographed me at the worst hour of my life and sold it, Julian Hale said, his voice carrying across the marble to the woman in teal who had stopped dead at the elevator. And I have spent every day since making sure no one ever caught me unguarded again. I built an empire out of giving nothing away. I bought empty rooftops so no one could watch me be a person. And last week, I used all of it. The silence, the walls, the brand, the same machine that's run me since I was 22, to tell a grocery store shelf that the only person who ever looked at me and saw something worth being gentle to was unaffiliated, no relationship. I made her disappear to keep her safe, the way the world made me disappear, and I called it protection, and it was the most cowardly thing I have ever done. The roof had gone utterly silent. The lens was running. He did not turn the watch. He looked at Nora across 50 feet of marble, and he did not stop. Her name is Nora Calloway. She's a nurse. She works nights. She is the most honest person I have ever met, and she has never once wanted anything from me, which is why I could not survive the thought of being seen wanting her. I am seen now. This is me, on the record, undisguised, wanting her, where everyone can buy the picture. I'm sorry I didn't move on that stair. I'm sorry I let a wall I built at 22 decide I wasn't allowed to choose you out loud. I'm choosing you out loud. It cost me the only thing I had left to protect, and it's the best money I've ever spent. And if you walk into the service stair right now, I'll deserve it. But I wanted the whole watching world to know I came out of the dark to ask. For a long moment, Nora did not move, and the city watched, for once, both of them. Then she crossed the marble in her terrible shoes. The squeak of them, the loudest thing on the roof. The same sound that had announced her out of the elevator on the first night. And she walked up to the most controlled man in the city. standing wrecked and visible in front of a running lens. And she did not check her own pulse. She put 2 fingers to his wrist instead, over the watch, holding it still, counting his heartbeat the way she counted everyone's. Fast, alive, undisguised. "You drank the worst coffee in the city for a whole summer," she said, low, just for him, while the camera caught everything. "I should have known then. Composed people don't do that." She pressed her forehead to his collarbone, 51 floors above the watching world, and let herself, finally, be a woman who was chosen, rather than a woman who was needed. 20 minutes, she said, against his shirt. "I came for 20 minutes. "I know," he said, into her hair, his arms coming around her at last in front of everyone, the photograph being made and sold, and unkillable now, and his, freely given, the dark sold off forever. "Stay for the rest of them." She took a real day off in the early autumn, which arrived the way autumn always does, sudden one morning, the summer's gold gone burnished, and the first cool edge in the dawn air. He did not buy a rooftop. He had learned. Instead, he drove her 3 hours up the coast to a town with one good diner, and they sat in a vinyl booth that was not theirs, with coffee that was, astonishingly, worse than the hospital's. And he made her laugh until she had to put the cup down. And no one in the diner knew who he was or cared. And he sat with his back to the window in the morning light and did not brace. Danny had her tuition. Nora had let him help, in the end, in the careful, negotiated way of 2 people learning a new language, because letting yourself be helped turned out to be a skill you could learn at 27 if someone was patient and did not make it a project. Camille had a new firm of her own that made people visible instead of invisible, and had sent, with no note, a single framed photograph, the harbour one, Julian undisguised, Nora's fingers on his wrist, which hung, against all of Julian's old instincts, in the front hall, where anyone who came in could see it. "I have a confession," Nora said over the terrible coastal coffee. "The first night, on the rooftop, when you said you had a number in your head, the odds I'd actually come, and it wasn't a generous number." She turned the cup a quarter turn on the table, his tell, handed back to him, and he caught it and smiled. "I had a number too. The odds I'd stay past 20 minutes. It was 0. I gave it 0. I came up that elevator 100% sure I was leaving." "What changed it?" he said, though he knew because he had been there, because he had watched it happen across an empty roof. "You moved the oil dish an inch toward me," she said. "Here, this is yours. You didn't answer my question and you fed me anyway. Nobody had ever once let me leave a question unanswered and stay. I didn't have a word for it that night. I have one now." She reached across the booth and moved his coffee an inch toward him. The old gesture. The whole summer of it. "Here, this is yours. It's the one you've been afraid of the whole time. It's not useful. It's not convenient. It doesn't bend my schedule or fix your wall. It's just true. And I'm not too tired to say it anymore." Outside the diner, the autumn light came clean off the water. And inside it, the most private man in the world sat with his back to the window where anyone could see, and let the women in the booth tell him the true thing out loud, and did not turn the watch, and was at last not lonely, and not hidden, and not afraid of being seen wanting the one good thing his money had never been able to buy, and his whole heart had finally been brave enough to choose.